She was dying in a room full of people, and no one could see it. Not her colleagues typing away at their desks. Not her manager preparing for the quarterly review. Not even the security guard who nodded hello every morning. Pearl Mosqueda was suffocating in plain sight, her heart racing like a caged bird throwing itself against invisible bars. But the most terrifying part? The man who promised to love and protect her was the one holding the key to her cage. And he had no intention of ever letting her out. Before we go any deeper into Pearl's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This is the story of a woman who thought she had found safety, only to discover she was living in the most dangerous place of all, her own home. Pearl Mosqueda was 34 years old, a logistics coordinator at a mid-sized shipping company in downtown Chicago. She had worked her way up from an entry-level position, earned her certifications, and built a reputation as someone you could count on. Reliable, thorough, the kind of person who never missed a deadline. Her co-workers liked her. Her boss trusted her. On paper, her life looked perfectly ordinary. But behind the closed door of the apartment she shared with her husband, Christopher Alvarado, Pearl was fighting a battle no one could see. A battle she didn't even fully understand herself. Because the enemy wasn't obvious. There were no bruises. No shouting matches that made the neighbors call the police. Just a slow, steady erosion of everything that made her feel like herself. And it all began with something that seemed like love. Pearl met Christopher 4 years earlier at a community event. He was charming, attentive, the kind of man who remembered small details. On their third date, he asked about her favorite flower, and a week later, he showed up with a bouquet of white tulips. He listened when she talked about her work frustrations, her complicated relationship with her mother, her dreams of one day traveling to Morocco. He made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. 6 months into their relationship, Pearl developed a heart condition. It started with occasional palpitations, a flutter in her chest that would come and go without warning. Her doctor diagnosed it as mild tachycardia, a condition where the heart beats too fast at rest. It wasn't life-threatening, but it required monitoring. Stress could make it worse, as could certain medications, caffeine, and lack of sleep. Her doctor gave her a list of lifestyle changes and told her to come back in 3 months. Christopher took the diagnosis harder than Pearl did. He insisted on attending every medical appointment. He researched her condition obsessively, printing out articles and highlighting passages about treatment options. He started cooking heart-healthy meals, measuring out portions, controlling what went into every dish. At first, Pearl found it sweet, caring. But slowly, without her realizing it, the care began to feel like surveillance. When they got married 2 years ago, Christopher gave Pearl a gift on their wedding night. It was a silver bracelet with a magnetic clasp, delicate and elegant. He told her it was a special medical device, something that would help regulate her heart rhythm. He said he had spent months researching it, consulting with specialists online, finding the best one. He fastened it around her wrist himself, his fingers gentle but firm. "Promise me you'll never take it off," he said. "Promise me, Pearl." And because she loved him, because she believed he was trying to protect her, she promised. For the first few weeks, nothing changed. Then slowly, Pearl started feeling worse. The palpitations that had been occasional became frequent. She felt lightheaded climbing the stairs to their apartment. At work, she found herself gripping her desk to steady herself, waiting for the dizziness to pass. She mentioned it to Christopher, and he grew anxious. He told her it was probably stress. He suggested she cut back her hours at work. He started insisting she text him throughout the day to let him know she was okay. If she didn't respond within 10 minutes, he would call. If she didn't answer, he would show up at her office. Her co-workers began to notice. They would exchange glances when Christopher appeared in the lobby, demanding to see her. But no one said anything, because it looked like love. It looked like a devoted husband worried about his sick wife. By the spring of this year, Pearl could barely make it through a workday. The pressure in her chest was constant now, a weight that made every breath feel like effort. Her vision would blur at random moments. She started carrying a small notebook to write things down because her memory felt foggy, unreliable. She was exhausted all the time, but sleep brought no relief. Christopher was always watching, always checking. He monitored what she ate, how much water she drank, whether she had taken her vitamins. He insisted she wear the bracelet at all times, even in the shower. When Pearl suggested maybe it wasn't helping, that maybe she should see a different doctor, Christopher became cold. He told her she was being ungrateful. He reminded her how much time he had spent researching the bracelet, how much money he had paid for it. He told her that if she really loved him, she would trust his judgment. And so Pearl kept wearing it, because leaving felt impossible, because challenging him felt dangerous, because somewhere deep down, she still believed he was trying to help her. That's what made it so hard to see. The abuse didn't look like abuse. It looked like devotion. It looked like care. But care doesn't leave you gasping for air. Care doesn't make you doubt your own reality. Care doesn't slowly steal your life away.
On a Tuesday morning in April, Pearl was sitting in a conference room at work. Her team was presenting the quarterly logistics report, and she was supposed to be taking notes. But the room kept tilting. The voices around her sounded muffled, like she was underwater. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She tried to take a deep breath, but her lungs wouldn't expand. The pressure in her chest was unbearable. She stood up abruptly, muttering something about needing air, and stumbled out of the conference room. Her colleagues watched her go, concerned but uncertain. Pearl made it to the elevator down to the lobby and out onto the street. The cool air hit her face, but it didn't help. Her legs were shaking. She couldn't walk any further. She spotted a bench near a bus stop and collapsed onto it, clutching her chest. Her vision was narrowing, darkening at the edges. She thought, this is it. This is how I die. Alone on a bench in the middle of the city. And then someone sat down beside her. His name was Daniel Hughes. He was 72 years old, a retired cardiologist who had spent 40 years treating heart conditions before retiring 3 years earlier. He had been walking to meet a friend for coffee when he saw Pearl on the bench. He didn't need a medical degree to recognize distress. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. Her skin was pale. Her hand was pressed against her chest. Daniel sat down slowly, keeping a respectful distance. He didn't touch her. He just spoke quietly, calmly. "My name is Daniel. I'm a retired doctor. Can you hear me?" Pearl nodded, unable to speak. Daniel continued. "I need you to try to slow your breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Can you do that with me?" Pearl tried. It was hard. Her body didn't want to cooperate. But Daniel was patient. He counted with her. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Slowly, the darkness at the edges of her vision began to recede. After a few minutes, Daniel asked, "Do you have a heart condition?" Pearl nodded again. "Tachycardia," she whispered. Daniel's eyes moved to her wrist. "What's that bracelet?" Pearl glanced down at it, confused by the question. "It's medical. My husband got it for me. It's supposed to help my heart." Daniel's expression changed. He leaned forward slightly. "May I see it?" Pearl hesitated, then extended her arm. Daniel examined the bracelet without touching it. His face grew serious. "This isn't a medical device. This is a magnetic bracelet. A strong one." Pearl blinked. "What?" Daniel looked at her directly. "If you have tachycardia, magnets can interfere with your heart's electrical signals. They can make the condition worse. Much worse. Depending on the strength, they can cause dizziness, chest pain, shortness of breath." The exact symptoms Pearl had been experiencing. She stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. "But my husband said. He researched it. He said it would help." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "I don't know your husband. But I know this. That bracelet is harming you. Take it off. Right now." Pearl's hands trembled as she reached for the clasp. She had promised Christopher. She had promised never to take it off. But Daniel was watching her, waiting, and something in his steady, calm presence made her trust him more than her fear. She unclasped the bracelet and held it in her palm. It felt heavier than it should. For a moment nothing happened. Then, slowly, the pressure in her chest began to ease. Just a little. Just enough to notice. Pearl took a full breath. The first real breath she had taken in months. Daniel watched her carefully. "How do you feel?" Pearl's eyes filled with tears. "Better. I feel better." Daniel nodded. "You need to see a cardiologist. A real one. Today, if possible. And you need to tell them about this bracelet." He paused, then added quietly, "And you need to ask yourself why your husband gave it to you." Pearl looked down at the bracelet in her hand. The silver glinted in the sunlight. It looked innocent. Beautiful even. But it had been slowly killing her. Daniel stood up. "I'm going to give you my number. If you need help, call me." He scribbled his contact information on a scrap of paper and handed it to her. Then he walked away, leaving Pearl alone on the bench with the bracelet in her hand and a terrible dawning understanding in her heart. Pearl didn't go home right away. She sat on that bench for another hour, staring at the bracelet, replaying the last 2 years in her mind. All the times Christopher had insisted she keep it on. All the times she had felt worse and he had told her it was stress, or her imagination, or her own fault for not taking care of herself. All the time she had suggested seeing another doctor and he had grown angry, defensive. She remembered the way he would check her wrist every morning, making sure the bracelet was still there. The way he would fasten it tighter when it seemed loose. The way he had smiled when she complained about feeling dizzy. "You just need to rest more," he had said. "Let me take care of you." But he hadn't been taking care of her. He had been controlling her, weakening her, making her dependent on him. Pearl stood up, still holding the bracelet. She walked to a nearby trash can and dropped it inside. The sound of it hitting the bottom was small, insignificant. But to Pearl, it felt like the loudest thing she had ever heard. She called her doctor's office from her cell phone. She explained that she was having a medical emergency and needed to be seen immediately. The receptionist, hearing the strain in her voice, squeezed her in for an appointment that afternoon. At the doctor's office, Pearl told the truth. She described the bracelet, the symptoms, the way Christopher had insisted she wear it. Her doctor, a woman in her 50s named Jennifer Valentino, listened without interrupting. Then she ran a series of tests. An EKG, blood work, a physical exam. When the results came back, Dr. Valentino sat down across from Pearl and spoke carefully. "Your heart is under significant stress. The magnetic field from that bracelet has been disrupting your heart's natural rhythm. If you had continued wearing it, the damage could have become permanent. You could have had a heart attack. You could have died." Pearl felt numb. She asked the question she was terrified to ask. Could my husband have known? Could he have known it would hurt me? Dr. Valentino's face was kind but serious. "I can't speak to his intentions. But I can tell you this. Information about the dangers of magnets and heart conditions is widely available. Anyone who did even basic research would have found it." Pearl sat in silence, the weight of those words settling over her like a shroud. Christopher had researched her condition obsessively. He had printed articles. He had consulted specialists. He would have known. He must have known. Dr. Valentino handed Pearl a printed copy of her test results and a note documenting the bracelet and its effects. "You may need this," she said quietly. Pearl nodded, understanding what she meant. Evidence. Proof. Protection. Pearl went home that evening. She walked into the apartment she had shared with Christopher for 2 years, and it felt like a stranger's home. Everything looked the same. The furniture they had picked out together. The photos on the wall. The kitchen where he cooked meals she had stopped tasting months ago. But now she saw it differently. She saw the cage he had built around her, careful and invisible. Christopher was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. He looked up and smiled when she walked in. "You're late." "I was worried." Pearl didn't smile back. She set her purse down on the counter and said, "I took off the bracelet." His expression froze. He stopped stirring. What? I took it off. I saw a doctor. She told me it was making me sick. For a moment Christopher said nothing. Then he put down the spoon, slowly, deliberately. He turned to face her fully. That's ridiculous. The bracelet helps you. You just don't understand how it works. Pearl shook her head. It's a magnet. Magnets interfere with heart conditions like mine. You would have known that if you researched it. And you did research it. Christopher's face hardened. You're being paranoid. That doctor doesn't know what she's talking about. I've been taking care of you. I've been keeping you safe. Pearl felt a surge of anger. She had been afraid for so long, she had forgotten what anger felt like. But now it burned bright and clear. You weren't keeping me safe. You were making me sick. On purpose. Christopher's voice grew louder. That's insane. Why would I do that? Pearl met his eyes. Because you wanted me weak. You wanted me dependent on you. You wanted me to need you so badly that I would never leave. Christopher slammed his hand on the counter. The sound echoed through the kitchen. You're ungrateful. Do you know how much I've done for you? How much I've sacrificed? Pearl's voice was steady now. You didn't sacrifice anything. You controlled me. You isolated me. You made me doubt myself. You made me think I was dying when you were the one killing me. Christopher's face twisted. He stepped toward her and Pearl stepped back. If you leave, he said, his voice low and threatening, you'll never make it on your own. You're too weak. You need me. Pearl felt the fear trying to rise up in her chest, but she pushed it down. She thought of Daniel on the bench. She thought of Dr. Valentino's calm, steady voice. She thought of the bracelet at the bottom of the trash can. No, she said. I don't. Christopher stared at her. And for the first time in 2 years, Pearl saw him clearly. Not as her protector. Not as her caretaker. But as a man who had tried to erase her piece by piece until there was nothing left but his own reflection. She turned and walked to the bedroom. She pulled a suitcase from the closet and began packing. Christopher followed her, shouting, pleading, threatening. But Pearl didn't stop. She packed clothes, documents, the printed medical report from Dr. Valentino. She packed everything she needed to survive. When she was done, she walked past Christopher without looking at him. She walked out the front door. She left behind the apartment, the furniture, the photos. She left behind the life she thought she had. And she didn't look back. Pearl stayed with a coworker, Anita Dixon, for the first 2 weeks. Anita had noticed how Christopher showed up at the office, how Pearl seemed to shrink whenever he was around. When Pearl showed up at her door with a suitcase and tear-streaked face, Anita didn't ask questions. She just opened the door wider and said, "Come in." During those 2 weeks, Pearl slowly began to piece her life back together. She filed for divorce. She provided Dr. Valentino's medical report as evidence of harm. Christopher tried to fight it. He sent texts, dozens of them, saying he loved her, saying he was sorry, saying she was overreacting. When Pearl blocked his number, he showed up at her workplace. Security had to escort him out. But Pearl didn't waver. She had spent 2 years suffocating. She wasn't going to let him pull her back under. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Christopher didn't attend the hearing. Pearl stood in the courtroom, listening to the judge declare the marriage dissolved, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Relief. Freedom. Herself.
Her health improved almost immediately. Without the bracelet, without the constant stress of living with Christopher, her heart stabilized. Dr. Valentino monitored her closely for the first few months, but the palpitations decreased. The dizziness faded. Pearl could breathe again. At work, her performance improved. Her boss, Kenneth Henson, noticed the change. "You seem different," he said one afternoon. "Stronger." Pearl smiled. "I am." 3 months after the divorce, Kenneth called Pearl into his office. He offered her a promotion. Senior Logistics Coordinator. A raise. Her own team to manage. Pearl accepted. She had earned it. But more importantly, she had survived to claim it. She moved into her own apartment. A small 1-bedroom with a balcony overlooking the park. She hung new photos on the walls. She bought a plant, a resilient succulent that thrived even when she forgot to water it. She started therapy, working through the trauma, learning to recognize the patterns of control and manipulation. She learned that what Christopher had done had a name: coercive control. She learned that she wasn't alone, that thousands of people, mostly women, experienced the same slow suffocation she had. That leaving was the bravest thing she could have done, and she learned to forgive herself for not seeing it sooner. 6 months after leaving Christopher, Pearl met Daniel Hughes again. She had reached out to him, wanting to thank him. They met at a coffee shop downtown. Daniel ordered tea. Pearl ordered coffee, something she could finally enjoy again without worrying about her heart. "I wanted to thank you," Pearl said. "You saved my life." Daniel shook his head gently. "You saved your own life. I just gave you permission to see what was already there." Pearl thought about that. She thought about how close she had come to dying, how she had believed for so long that Christopher's control was love, how she had been trained to doubt herself, to dismiss her own instincts, to accept suffering as care. "Do you think he knew?" Pearl asked. "Do you think he knew the bracelet would hurt me?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think some people need others to be smaller than them, weaker, dependent. It's not about love. It's about power. And they'll use anything they can to maintain that power, even something that looks like care." Pearl nodded. She had come to the same conclusion. It didn't matter whether Christopher had consciously intended to hurt her. What mattered was that he had, and that she had found the strength to leave. Today, Pearl works as a senior logistics coordinator. She leads a team of 6 people. She's good at her job. She's respected. She has friends. She has plans for the future. She's thinking about taking that trip to Morocco she always dreamed about. Her heart still skips a beat sometimes. But now it's from excitement, from possibility, from the simple, profound joy of being alive and free. She thinks about Christopher occasionally. She wonders if he understands what he did. She doubts it. People who need to control others rarely see themselves clearly. But she doesn't dwell on it. She has rebuilt her life from the ground up. She has learned that love doesn't demand your weakness to prove its strength. That care doesn't come with conditions. That you can survive the unthinkable and come out stronger on the other side. Pearl's story isn't unique. Right now, thousands of people are living in relationships where control masquerades as care, where isolation is disguised as protection, where harm is dressed up as love. And many of them don't even realize it. Because the most dangerous abuse is the kind you can't see. The kind that leaves no bruises. The kind that makes you question your own reality until you can't trust yourself anymore. If you're watching this and something feels familiar, if you recognize yourself in Pearl's story, please know this. You're not imagining it. You're not overreacting. And you're not alone. There are people who can help. Organizations like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, local shelters, therapists who specialize in trauma. Reaching out is not weakness. It's survival. And survival is the first step toward freedom. Think about the people in your life. Your friends, your co-workers, your family members. If someone seems smaller than they used to be, if they're always checking their phone anxiously, if their partner shows up unexpectedly and they seem afraid, pay attention. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is notice. And if you're someone who has survived, who has left, who has rebuilt, know that your story matters. Your strength matters. You are proof that it's possible to escape the invisible chains and build a life on your own terms. Pearl Mosqueda did it. And if she can, so can you. Now we want to hear from you. What would you have done in Pearl's situation? Would you have trusted the stranger on the bench? Would you have confronted your partner? How do you think you would have recognized the abuse if it was happening to you? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, share it. You never know who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge us, that make us think, that remind us of the strength of the human spirit. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your heart guarded, and your life your own. Because the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. And no one should ever have the power to take that away from you.